It's easy to be swamped or just bored with the whole business of the state regulation of UK psychological therapies. But if we can find the patience to look at the big picture, what might we see? The Department of Health's plans for state regulation do pose major problems for UK psychopractice. The department doesn't seem to have any sense of the scale of what they're trying to grasp. Therapies are local currents in the human condition, and the Department of Health doesn't see that in preparing the therapies for capture by the state, they're attempting to take hold of the oceanic expanses of the human condition and cut bits out of it. They don't seem to understand that therapy means conversations that reverberate with desire, with doubt, with need, with feeling, with confrontation. The telling and retelling of our own and other people's stories, the collisions and the bonding between our personal histories and the collective histories of humankind. Isn't this what working with the human condition involves? These are living qualities that we can touch but are never able to grasp. Nor should we tolerate anyone attempting to grasp them and turn them into a product. And yet, Skills for Health, a subsidiary, let us not forget, of the Skills for Business Quango, an employer-led organisation, they have been hired by the Department of Health to do exactly that. And at this moment, the summer of 2007, we can suppose that they're confidently quantifying, measuring and analysing the infinitely subtle states that the word therapy stands for, and turning them into a product, standards, national occupational standards. These organisations somehow believe that in mapping and measuring the therapies, they can magically get outside the human condition, rather than appreciate that they're inhabitants like the rest of us. And through acting in this way, as though we're outside nature, outside the human condition, this has been very damaging for our planetary ecology. And this belief that the human condition can be colonized, captured and carved up into managerial responsibilities is ultimately a recipe for client harm, not client protection. The Skills for Health's harvesting of competencies and roles presumes a technocratic universe of technique, of treatment, of applied knowledge, of evidence-based practice and solutions, and even, you couldn't make it up, objective measurements of character. This is a violent process, the antithesis of love. It entails coercion, sign up or you won't be able to work, and threat, make mistakes and you might lose your livelihood. Do I exaggerate? No, the Health Professions Booklet, Standards of Conduct, Performance and Ethics uses the word must 84 times in 8 pages. Put in a nutshell, the taxonomic map, measure and capture process that the Department of Health has set in motion, destination the Health Professions Council, involves the extraction and disposal of love from the psychological therapies, as though it was a waste product. Does any of this matter? Isn't regulation inevitable, and what does love have to do with it? Can't we be positive about it and, see it as an opportunity? No, I don't think so. Regulation isn't inevitable, and yes, love does matter. It matters because love, seeking the flourishing of the other, is possibly the dimension of the human condition that's most fundamental to well-being. Through love we can hold knowledge about formation and behaviour, psychology. Through love we can hold knowledge about the use and abuse of power, politics. Through love we can hold subtleties of meaning and presence, spirituality. Through love we can keep all three of these fluidly accessible in our client work, as we all know what's seeking to be born. That's why love matters. But sadly, the power of love, as the history of Christianity shows, can be addictively attractive to those devoted to the love of power, and for whom love is something inconvenient, something to be colonized and commodified, which means eliminated. So I think we're headed for the following situation. Sitting at the health profession's regulatory table will be a collection of the great and good of psychopractice. People full of good intentions, but steeped in the love-free faith of technocracy, who raise the flag of their standards and say to both practitioners and clients, we know what's good for you, and we have the power to insist. Many practitioners, especially those thousands who've been coming into counselling and psychotherapy in recent years, in the last 5 years for instance, seem to have no inkling of this. At two recent seminars on the subject of state regulation in May 2007, the mix of trainers, practitioners and students seemed extraordinarily uninformed of the regulatory process that was coming towards them. I felt they exemplified the widespread passivity about regulation that's allowed its steady progress towards the statute book. And then, on the journey home, there was a striking aha moment for me. I realized that psychically these practitioners were already state regulated, but they just yet hadn't had a chance to do the paperwork. But let's return to the big picture, because the claimed inevitability of state regulation and the need for client protection are transinductions. They are intended to disable discrimination. There is no systematic research demonstrating a need for client protection. And regulation of the psychological therapies has long been a very low government priority. And then, following intensive lobbying by mainstream training and accrediting bodies and the universities who collude with them, accelerated by the shipment effect, an unwilling government has been seduced into bringing forward regulation. Take a close look at the Health Professions Council, their chosen and apparently immutable vehicle for regulation of the psychological therapies. Read their documents. It's not often that the future, your future as a practitioner, is so clearly laid out. And it may work, with copious amounts of false compliance for those people in the NHS and nearby who can't afford to say no. But so far as most of the 70 or 80% of us who work as psychotherapists or counsellors outside the NHS, so far as we refuse to register, state regulation will be counted a failure. So if you feel uneasy about state regulation, object, resist, say no, prepared for principled non-compliance. Remember the big picture. Love matters. And be sure to get a copy of my book about these matters, Regulating the Psychological Therapies, from taxonomy to taxidermy. It's available from PCCS Books.